Hi, everybody, and welcome to the European VC podcast. I am David, also known as the LP Syndicate Lead, and as usual, joined by my dear co-founder, Andreas, the Hype Man. Today, we have Omar Hassan with us. Omar is a general partner at MENA Tech Fund, a 25 million USD pre-seed seed stage venture fund in Dubai, backing Middle Eastern and North African AgriTech, FinTech, and B2B SAAS businesses in Egypt, Israel, UAE, Saudi Arabia, or UK tech with market fit into the MENA region. MTF are investing out of Fund 1 with a total of 25 million USD AUM and an established portfolio of 9 companies, including Soos Lenkie Wuilt Selectika. At MTF, Omar focuses on SAAS and AgriTech in MENA and has led investments into Wuilt, SwftBox, Selectika, and Lenkie. If you're listening in and love our show, drop us a review, follow the pod, and subscribe at eu.vc.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
United and determined, we can serve as a model for other regions of the world.
The nature of a problem requires a European response.
Europe is a story of new beginnings, new beginnings.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
So, Omar, you are our very good friend that has given us the opportunity to be part of the team organizing the delegation of European VCs going to Dubai for the North Star Conference. That's very exciting. But before we get into all of this, let's just say that this interview is going to be 100% dedicated to talking about how to raise in the region. And that is, of course, exactly what most people that we have been talking to have said, how can I do that? How does it actually work? And Omar, thanks a million for joining us in for this conversation.
Guys, I'm so excited and thank you so much. It is a question that's probably been asked, like you said, a million times over the years, and we'll dive into it. But I tell you what, since we started to do these trips 5 years ago, it's always been one of our focus to get more European VCs into the region, seeing some more great investors to co-invest alongside within the region. But you're right, it is always the questions, how do I raise, can I raise, where from? So really excited to get into this today.
I couldn't agree more, and I think you nailed it on its head, and that's why we're interested in collaborating and being part of this as well. But just before we dive deep into this, if anyone is listening in and think this sounds cool, feel free to reach out and express your interest in joining. We'll see if we can get you a spot and come with us. Maybe actually, Omar, you could say a few words about what we've got in store, because you've done a few of these trips by now, right?
Yeah, I think we're in our fifth or sixth year in a row. It's going to be amazing. Look, the conference has evolved so much over the years. I remember actually the first time we invited European VCs to come, we could only manage to take 10. Now, this year, we're aiming about 400. And also, what was really interesting, the first group that we took were purely going there to understand, how do I fundraise from here? Whereas now, we've seen actually co-investment happen. We've seen capital being raised. We've seen European VCs look up to set up in the region. It's going to be an amazing 4 days, over 3,000 startups, about 250 speakers, 800 funds, and most importantly, a lot of fun, and a lot of things to see in Dubai.
That is incredibly cool, and it's so cool to see how it grew from 10 to 400 VCs. That is amazing. We'll talk much more about that, but I think it's just about time that we dedicated some of this episode to getting to know you. So many of our listeners might not know you yet, Omar. So just tell us, who are you? How did you get into venture? What got you landed in Dubai with that beautifully sounding UK accent and setting up MTF?
How did I get into venture? It was a bit of a mistake, but at the same time, kind of a natural progression to what we were doing. I was always kind of involved with startups from, probably my early days, had a couple of successes, a lot of failures. Around 2008, 2009, I started to mentor in the UK through an initiative called the Startup Loans Initiative, which was set up by the government to support early stage startups and SMEs. And then I started to write small checks, very, very small checks. So it was always kind of something that I was interested in. But it wasn't until maybe 2015 when we launched Global Growth Hub, which is Global Growth Hub is an economic development consultancy that's focused on tech and innovation, and focused between Europe and the Middle East. We were seeing around 2012 that the region was changing a lot. It was no longer this will be we'll touch on this later on, because it was very acceptable back then in 2012 for you as a young person to go to your father or mother or whoever it may be and say, I want $250,000, but I'm going to buy a sports car with it. But you can't say I want $250,000 to put into a startup. It was very normal for you to say, I'm going to work for the Big Four, but it was not acceptable for you to say I'm going to launch a business. But then that started to change around 2012, 2013 in Egypt, in the UAE, in Saudi. So we saw early on that actually there was a need to better connect Europe and the Middle East, support, whether it be from venture capital or programs or market access. So that's where Global Growth Hub was born. So we focus on 3 areas: venture capital, working with European funds to show them the region, but then also work with portfolio companies to grow. We focus with the second piece of market access, working with companies to scale to the region. And the third piece is a lot of advisory work from government. And as part of that, really over the years, so we deliver programs on behalf of the World Bank, European Investment Bank, and private sector. We've seen a lot of startups, a lot of great ideas, but we didn't have the capital to invest ourselves. And that's where the MTF came about 2 years ago. So, you know what, let's bite the bullet, let's start investing, and let's see if we can create, a successful fund that bridges mainly the UK and the Middle East. And here we are. It's been a journey, but it's been a fun journey. I'll let you know in a few years if it's been a successful one or not.
We will be here asking and curious about it for sure. Omar, let me ask you, regarding MTF, just could you paint a bit of a clear picture? What's the team like? Where are you guys based? Just some of the details there.
Yeah, so MTF, we're HQ'd in London. I'm based in Dubai. And to go back to your point, actually, the Dubai reason is, I think, once I'm Egyptian by birth, so North African or African, and at some point you need to get back to some vitamin D, and that's partly why we're in Dubai. But it's the fund. We're HQ'd in London, and we are investing across the Middle East. And when we say the Middle East, we focus on Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. And a lot of people will be saying Israel as well. I said yes. It's always been our thesis to have a fund that's pan-regional. Does that make sense? And also look at the innovation and the tech that comes out of Israel and how that can be taken into the wider region, especially within agriculture. And the second part of the fund is we focus on UK tech that has a market opportunity to grow to the Middle East. So especially in FinTech, which is a real area for growth for UK companies and UK startups. The team is based across London, Dubai, and Tel Aviv. We're a small team, 4 of us, 4.5.
Could I ask you a question just right off the bat here, diving into what's probably one of the questions that are a bit tough to answer on a public podcast like this one. You said you also do Israel, and everyone knows that we just got a deal about a year ago or so between, what you might say is the leading region in the Gulf states and then Israel, and we're now seeing them collaborate more. Have you ever received that political, not pressure, but counter positioning towards your fund?
Sometimes, look, I think with us, we're not like with any other VC. We're about making money, right? So it's not for us. When we look at the region, our thesis was devised around, look, Israel's always been a startup nation, creating tech that goes global from day one. And in fact, actually, the Israeli chutzpah, as they call it, it's if it's not going to put the Israeli flag on the world map, what's the point? The rest of the region, we're still in its early days. Look, it's a 455 million people marketplace. There's a lot of great talent, but the innovation was still very local, very regional. So what we wanted to do was, look, how do we tap into the Israeli tech, to balance our portfolio while tapping into regional tech that might not achieve us, the 4, 5, 6x that we'd want to return the fund. In terms of political, look, there's always been collaboration. It's just now it's open. I think, we've had some pushback from VCs that, historically can't invest in Israel or co-invest in Israeli companies, but that's fine. We earmark our Israeli investments to the side. But look, we believe that soon we will go from startup nation to startup region. And I think Israeli tech plays a big part in that, equally as much as regional tech across Egypt, UAE, and Saudi. Is that politically correct enough or no?
No. Well, I asked the question exactly because, there are so many, and that's definitely going to be one of the things that we're going to talk about in this as well. There's so many people that have preconceived notions, and some will prove to be right. And I think that some will have some notions confirmed throughout this conversation, and some will see them dispelled. And I think that what you just said there may have dispelled some views for some people that it is actually possible to be beyond the pioneering mission of saying, well, we should be a tech region, not a tech nation. So that's why I asked the question, and I think that that's exactly what we should be doing in this conversation, diving into the important questions that you may not be able to read in the most public magazines.
We believe that at some stage we will invest in companies that are co-founded between, the Israeli kind of deep tech mindset, but also the consumer-facing mindset of Egyptian entrepreneurs or MENA entrepreneurs. And our latest investment was actually into a company of 3 founders, 1 Israeli, 2 Egyptians, met at MIT and co-founded the company together. So we've got the deep tech in Tel Aviv, we've got consumer-facing stuff in Cairo. So we already see the thesis come to life. And, I think that investment with the founders' mentality and what they're doing, I think could be an amazing one.
Sounds like we should have a MENA Tech focused podcast purely. It sounds like about the time to connect the ecosystems.
And on that note, for the attentive and interested listener, we did a mini short series already, so do check that out. We have a few, I think it's 4 episodes or so more focused on MENA. Omar, I think the great place to start here is to ask you to give us kind of an overview of the GCC fundraising landscape. And I think I can safely say that many of our listeners might not even be sure exactly what the GCC is, but it's basically the Gulf Cooperation Council, which brings together 6 Arab countries, if I remember correctly. But Omar, give us a quick rundown of what should investors that are fundraising know about the GCC landscape.
You're right. It is the Gulf Cooperation Council, but I think it's 5 countries. So you have Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Bahrain.
Is Kuwait in the list or not? I always forget.
Kuwait is in the list, so that is 6 then. Is it 6? We're going to have to edit this bit out. It's 6.
That's me prepping.
Many people will, when they think GCC, will probably straight away spring to their minds UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. They're normally in the news, and you hear about them a lot, whether it be from most recently the World Cup or Vision 2030, or the UAE as a holiday destination. Obviously, all very big sovereign funds, all very young countries. And I think it's been mentioned a few times, but honestly, with the exception of Saudi Arabia, goes back hundreds of years in history. The rest are probably, if you look at the UAE, it's 50 years old, but I would say consider it as 20 years old, because it's really a lot of the stuff you're seeing at the moment is in the last 20 years. So they are a startup in their own right. So yeah, that's the GCC. But then it's very important to kind of take another step back and look at the North African region, because what you have is the other Arab-speaking nations. And I think we've touched on this previously. You've got Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, Palestine, Iraq, which is kind of the Middle East. And those are nations that are very closely affiliated to the Gulf states. And typically, if you're looking at it from a VC perspective, typically a lot of, up until maybe 5 years ago, if you're looking at any deals or any early stage investment, you wouldn't be looking in the GCC. You'd be looking in Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, etc. That's typically where entrepreneurs will start off from, launch a business, validate, start to scale slowly. and then landed somewhere like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, or Qatar to then access that follow-on funding and look at the region and beyond. Sector-wise, look at everything. I think if you look at somewhere like the UAE at the moment, it's COP28 in November. It is a lot of focus on sustainability, on energy. Again, it's same in Saudi Arabia, but FinTech has always been booming and it still has a lot more room to go. Healthcare is a massive, massive area to look at. And obviously, you throw AI on top of everything. And interestingly, the UAE has, I think, the only AI minister in the world, federal minister focused on AI, how AI can be utilized. He's a great guy. He's young, very clued on. He's doing a lot in that space. That gives you kind of a few starting points.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question this is truly an outsider's question and it might just be a proof of my ignorance. But, if we look at GCC countries, MENA and the Arab speaking countries, and if I literally pulled up a map, right? Because I don't know this view of the world by heart. So I needed to pull up a map. And then you talk about Jordan and Lebanon, and Egypt as well, of course. But the scale of these countries, there's really, really small countries. Right. But you did say that is where you would go for deal flow. And I'm really curious to understand, right? Because if I go to the list of like Arab speaking countries, that also includes like much bigger countries like Libya, Algeria, even Morocco is in like sheer dimension much bigger than Lebanon. Right. And just love to understand a bit more the geo of why is it like that, and why is it that these ecosystems are at different levels of maturity? Where does that come from?
Ooh, I think the simple answer would be, again, without getting myself into any issues, is leadership. Honestly, it's leadership. Look, I'm an Egyptian. I am a proud Egyptian, even though I've grown up outside of Egypt all my life. So if you look at somewhere like Egypt, it's officially, I think, 110, 120 million people. Then you look at the Gulf states, the UAE is 9 million. Out of that 9 million, 8 million are expats, immigrants, whichever way you want to call it, and 1 million or 900,000 locals. Saudi Arabia is about 30 million, and Qatar is maybe 3 million. Oman's the same, Kuwait the same. But it's the leadership. So the GCC is kind of really seen as the anchor of the Arab nations. The leadership have created prosperity, a lot of investments, and so on. But actually, the need to innovate and the need to look at different ways to is in places like Egypt and Jordan and Lebanon, whether it be from banking, whether it be from healthcare. It's where the populations are. It's where the need for innovation it really is. Then the entrepreneurs. You look at somewhere like Egypt, I think somewhere like Cairo, I think the annual number is for nearly 600,000-700,000 engineers graduating Cairo every year. So historically, it's as a region as a whole, it's very highly educated. It's if you wanted to get married a long time ago, you'd have to say to your father or the bride, I'm an engineer, or I'm an accountant, or I work in the Big Four. Whereas now it's quite fashionable to say, actually, I'm a startup and I've just raised 5 million, uncle, and things are looking good for me at the moment. So the need is to innovate in those countries, but the leadership is not there. So what you'd find then after that, for policy, for stability, entrepreneurs lead and go into the Gulf states where they'll be given the kind of the canvas to flourish.
I think it's worthwhile saying to the audience here that, and Omar, correct me if I'm wrong, right? But there is quite some strength in one going to the region, having done the homework, so that the things that you talk about here is something that's not foreign to you. Am I right in saying that that's a good place to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice to understand where you're going, right? It's always nice to show that you've done some sort of research, and especially somewhere like the Gulf, where it's very natural for somebody to get in on the plane to go to Egypt, and they've done a lot of research about the history of Egypt, right? You've seen it, you hear, the pyramids, Giza, all that sort of stuff. But for a lot of people going into the Gulf, they don't think, actually, the Gulf does have history. It's a massive trading hub going back years. It's been going through transformation in the last 20, 25 years. So, spend a few moments, read about it. It's all there, it's all online, and you'll be surprised.
And now let's get into the fundraising part very specifically. Could you tell us what would you say are the key differences between fundraising in the GCC compared to Europe, where most of our audiences are used to raising from?
I think time is a major factor. We have LPs in Europe that we knew within an hour that, yeah, they're going to be part of this fund. They're going to be part of it. We have LPs in the region where 6-7 months later we didn't know. So time is a big factor. It's and I think you've got to have that from day one. Understand that it does take time. The pool of LPs, again, depending on the fund and depending on who you are, you could be very limited to that pool. So if you're looking at kind of funds of funds, for example, and the sovereigns, look, the sovereigns, unless you're a tier one fund, I don't think you would raise from. The competition is so high. They know what they're going after. It tends to be tier one US or European funds. If you go back a step or two from that, you look at somewhere like Dubai Future District Fund. Yes, that's a great starting point to get an understanding of what they were looking for and what they're investing. But again, you're talking kind of a few months of relationship building before you get to kind of the next stage of the due diligence. Somebody said a while back, a guy called Mohammed Al-Abar is probably one of the most successful business people in the UAE. And this is really true if you started to deal with the families in the UAE. And he said something along the lines of, before we do business together, come and have dinner with me at my mother's house and I'll do the same at your mother's house. And I'm not saying literally that's what you've got to do, but it gives you the idea of the mentality of the families. These are very traditional families. They're evolving a lot at the moment, and they're changing. The leadership within the families changing. Younger generations coming in, but it's still got some way to go. So understand that once you start to dealing with the families, and there is a lot of them, which is a positive, which is a great thing. Again, it's time. But in terms of sophistication, in terms of due diligence, in terms of what they're looking for, I don't think there's much difference anymore between Europe and the GCC, whether it be the funds of funds, whether it be the families. These teams are very well set up. So if you put the time element aside, they know what they want. They know what they're looking for. They fully understand VC now. 5, 6, 7 years ago, it wasn't the case. It was still going back to that example of put the money in real estate or put it onto something that you can see, feel, and touch. Whereas now they understand VC and they know the value. It's just picking the right one now, I guess.
You mentioned Dubai Future District Fund just before. We actually have done an episode, our 114th one in our MENA special series with Sharif, who runs that fund. So if you want to dive into that and understand a bit more how they think about their investment activities and so on, go and listen to our episode number 114. I would love to ask you, Omar, just one more question on this topic, which is, could you tell me what are the specific sectors, if there are any, that are particularly attractive to the LPs that are operating in GCC now?
Look, I mean, I guess this goes back to who you're speaking to, but I would say there's a couple of things on this one. In terms of the funds of funds, if you're going to someone like Dubai Future District Foundation, there's a massive appetite now for specialist VCs. So, not sector agnostic one, but actually, health is a massive area. So, if it's a fund, you're specializing on health tech, that's the one. If it's sustainability or energy, that's a massive cost area. So, specialist funds is where the appetite is. From an LP perspective, look, if you go to Abu Dhabi, understand that actually a lot of it is around health and a lot of it is around energy. So if that's you, that's what you're doing, I would definitely head to Abu Dhabi and speak to the likes of Mubadala, ADQ, and a few others there. Even the families, that's where a lot of their family businesses are in. That's where a lot of their investments are in. Dubai tends to be a bit more open, but again, it depends on the family. But if you went to somebody like, for example, Mohammed Al-Abar, you've been looking at commerce, you've been looking at construction tech. So again, tailor it to who you're speaking to would be my advice. I would stay away from FinTech now if I was you.
And why is that, Omar?
There's plenty. I mean, look, I think it's the other part of it as well. I think the region where we go back 5 years, it's kind of, it was about getting startups going, right? Getting the ecosystem going. I think now it's really the time about looking at what does the next 10, 15, 20 years look like, not just for the GCC, but the wider region and the world. And I think that's where, almost looking at, I think we've done the consumer facing stuff now. I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of FinTech, there's a lot of banking going on. I think now is going back to those points, education, healthcare, how can we make education more accessible to the masses, but also using the UAE as a platform into Africa, where there's a massive need and market around that. And health and energy is where I think a lot of the focus will be over the next 2 years or so.
So we featured your thinking or many of the things that we're talking about here also on our newsletter. And you did a bit in one of our most recent ones that I really enjoyed, because you had a phrase in there where you said that the easy money thinking about the region, that boat has sailed. I'd love to ask you to just expand a bit more on that view and take us through your overview thinking there, because then we can dive even further into building relationships and trust with limited partners in the region.
3 years ago, it was GITEX week, and I was in a car with a couple of investors that had come over from Europe, and one of them in particular, I'm not going to name names, but he'd never been to the region and never been to the Gulf anyway, but never been to the wider region. We were driving through Dubai, and he said to me, I was expecting to see camels on the side of the road. And that's, and I'm not joking. And the funniest thing about it, it's probably one of the most successful European funds. And I thought to myself, holy crap, hey, how is somebody trusting you with their money? And B, what have you, what are you watching? And that goes the same with the kind of the assumption that everybody in the Gulf has an oil pipe in their back garden, and the money's there, the oil is pumped, the oil is being pumped out. That's not the case. Look, so that, there's that misconception, but also the times have changed. Again, I think anybody who's been to Dubai probably 6-7 years ago and comes now, you will feel that change on the ground. There's been a lot of mistakes made over the years, and nobody's denying that, nobody's saying there hasn't. There's been a lot of checks that have been written. There's been a lot of deals that have not given back a return or have not materialized anything of value on the ground. People have learned, and the simple thing is people have learned from writing those checks or doing those deals. The maturity of the LPs has changed. Like I said, these families and funds, you look at whether the likes of Dubai Future District Fund headed by Sharif. Sharif has been around the block. He's spent a lot of time in San Francisco. He's founded businesses. He's one of the most successful funds, early stage funds in the region. So the leaders and the leadership within these organizations have changed. But also, they've seen a lot of funds come over saying, we can deliver this amazing return. We've got this amazing access to pipeline, et cetera, that hasn't materialized. And, and I think they've also seen a lot of people that have come, taken the money and have not returned. And that's a massive factor. And that's why I say, now, if you're looking to fundraise, it's the other way around. It's spending the time on the ground and doing that work and be seen rather than come and ask and go. It's what's a massive flip at the moment that shocks a lot of people.
Omar, you shared or you paraphrased a cool quote by Mohammed Al-Abbar: "Before you do business, come have dinner with me and my mother, and I'll do the same," which I think goes a long way to explain like the mindset and the way relationships are built. So unless you have anything to add there, let me ask you a slightly different question, which is, what do you see LPs in the region kind of looking for in terms of the relationships they have with their portfolio GPs? So the GPs they have invested in. So is it a pure kind of it's a money thing, like it's returns, it's diversification, it's a financial argument thing? Or actually is this approach of having dinner with my mother and me having dinner with yours, you and yours, does it also go beyond the investment decision and into what these individuals and families expect to get out of these relationships in the long term?
And by the way, if you get to have that dinner, it'll be an amazing dinner. I'm not saying don't have the dinner will be amazing.
If Mohammed Al-Abbar is listening in, he should also have that dinner with my mom, because she's an amazing lady and she cooks very well.
That's your way of groveling for a dinner in Dubai.
No way, no way.
I think there's a couple, right? So if you go to somebody, again, we keep using Dubai Future District Fund as an example, but look, they are the Dubai entity. So their mandate is almost two areas, right? And their interest is, can they bring amazing specialist funds into Dubai to invest? But also, would those specialist funds tick another mandate of theirs by bringing portfolios to scale into Dubai and use Dubai as a place to scale from? So that's their mandate. That's what's in their forefront. So if you tick those boxes, have a conversation with Sharif and the team. There's other LPs on the ground as well that are similar within the free zones, and they have their mandate is to bring entities into Dubai. So again, if you can help them understand, see the benefit of your portfolios and potentially portfolio scaling that way, great. Now, the families, I would say 70% of their mentality is making a financial return. And I think people need to understand that it's, they want to see a return on their investment. That's all it is. I'd say about 30% of their mentality is, can you bring me technology that will benefit our operations, whether it be in energy, whether it be in retail, whether it be in banking, whether it be in automotive. But I think that's still only a small mindset. I don't think that part of their thinking is there yet. So I would say 70%, show me how you're going to make me the money back and more, and 30%, can you add value to my existing portfolio? But I think that 30% is going to grow, and we've seen a lot more stuff, especially from the larger entities like Majid Al Futtaim and Altair, looking at kind of innovation that come into plug into there and diversify their portfolio, etc.
Yeah. And Omar, to the story that you shared of the let's call it theoretical successful European GP that thinks we see camels in every corner when you go into the region, do you see any kind of cultural nuances as well that GPs, as an example, GPs joining in this year's trip should be aware of? Because sometimes, culture is a bitch in the sense that, it is something that we grow with and we're completely unaware of other cultures until we are exposed to them.
Look, I think as Europeans, I think we're quite good at, there's always the exception, like our friend from a couple of years ago, but look, I think we're quite good at, cultural sensitivities. We're quite good at kind of being a bit open-minded, understanding. I think what it is for a lot of people when they come to Dubai, because you'll probably spend, 90% of your time dealing with either a fellow European or an Egyptian or an American. And I think, do you know what I mean? It's so diverse, so multicultural. And 10% of your time will be spent dealing with an Emirati. But that 10% is kind of the decision-making 10%, right? So, when you're dealing with that 10%, just, they don't speak politics, avoid politics at all costs. Don't kind of disrespect or say anything negative towards the UAE. Keep it to business and family and try to get that understanding, but just avoid the politics and anything around that. But, they're very kind of European as well. You got to also understand that most of the Emiratis spend their entire summers in Europe, whether it be in Paris, where actually Vienna is really popular now. Obviously, the UK has always been popular. Berlin, actually Munich is one of the most popular destinations for Emirati travelers. So, they spend their time in Europe. They understand Europe.
Munich, that is unexpected as a destination.
Apparently, I asked a friend of mine, Faisal, I said to him, because he said, I'm going to Munich, we go there, we have an apartment there. And I said, why? So I don't understand.
Exactly.
Why? Apparently Munich is really safe. Really cool to walk around. That was what I got from him, especially for young women.
It's good enough of a reason, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, when you're comparing it to walking around London, you might as well go to Munich. Safety first. I think Munich. I don't know.
Well, at least in London or in Munich, they don't drive on the wrong side of the road, so you won't be hit by someone for that reason. I'd love to ask you, because you said don't talk about politics, and there's something that VCs tend to do quite a bit, and that's tweeting around or Xing around or whatever that's called now. If you take Dubai money or GCC money or want to sometime down the road, would you say that you should be mindful also what you would kind of engage in on social media? Just as anyone would, if you took money from Volvo, you probably wouldn't share a news story about Volvo being crap or whatever. Or would you say that, you know, there is a sensitivity here and you'd probably be better off not talking about this?
I was actually looking at, is it X now, right? It's X. And
it's Xing, yes. It can't be tweeting, right? It must be Xing.
No. It's Xing. And I saw just without diversion, but I saw a number of VCs removing the hop-in handle from their Xing profile over the last 24 hours. But it's, you know, yeah, look, we just don't do politics. And there's nothing, you know, there's nothing wrong with Xing or writing whatever it is you want to write. But yeah, just don't do it, really. It's quite simple. Like, just don't do it. Keep politics out of it. You know, and it's actually on the same level. The beauty of it in the region, a lot of people don't talk politics, especially in the UAE, because actually it's designed in a way for everybody to prosper. Whether it's, you know, you can go somewhere like the UAE and live the life on the palm and have your Instagram backdrops, and you know, if you're that kind of person, it's there for you, right? It's built, it's there. You can go to, and honestly, you can go to the UAE and work 24 hours a day and build a company from scratch. And actually, if you look at a lot of the wealth in the UAE, especially that's been created over the last 20 years, it's been by immigrants coming to the UAE and building something from zero to multi-billions. So it's designed for you to do that. Whether it be the policy, the framework, etc. If you want to go there and live as a family and a comfortable life and, you know, just hide away from everything, you can do that. So I think, you know, respect the way the country is designed, respect the way things are done, and just talk business. And that's it. Keep everything else out of it, and try to limit your threads, because they do come back and haunt you at some stage, I guess.
I'm curious. So, Omar, let's take this to a different topic, which is evaluating GCC limited partners. And I'm of course asking this because the most important thing almost in fundraising is knowing who not to fundraise from, in the sense that there's a lot of people with a lot of money, but there's not that many that would have a fit for your fund. Is there anything that you would say can guide European VCs that are preparing the trip to Dubai with us for North Star as an example, that are saying, okay, so I want to meet LPs there. I know Omar has told me on the podcast that I should probably not expect them coming into the fund that I'm closing in December if I go there in October. So still, if I want to meet them now, start building the relationship for the next fund or the fund after that, how should I go about this? How should I start filtering the LPs? How should I start getting in touch with them? Is it just normal rules that apply, or are there specific things that you would say this is worthwhile paying attention to?
I have a list that you can subscribe to. I'll send you a monthly subscription fee if you want it.
Nice. It's 1,000. It's 1,000K, right?
It's look, it's just a small retainer and a small percentage at the end of it. You know, but interestingly, on that point, honestly, rule number one: if anybody says to you, "I can raise money for you from the GCC. Here's my fee. Here's my retainer," run a mile. And I think that's something to be wary of from the beginning. There are honestly, I don't know how many of these people around, and not a single one of them is successful in what they do. I could probably tell you of three, and then you can even get them referenced by other European funds that are worthwhile speaking to if you want to go down that route. So rule number one is avoid any fundraisers in the region, honestly. Rule number two, it's a really small ecosystem, really small country. A few clicks on the internet, you can do background checks on potential LPs. A few conversations with local funds, which is a really great way to start. And there's some amazing funds out there, whether it be BICO, MEVP, Sharut Partners, Global Ventures. There's a lot of them. And we've got Global Ventures actually in a few weeks, haven't we, Andreas? They will tell you, the who and who not in the GCC. Look at if you're speaking to the families, you can look at their existing businesses and interests, and that will give you an idea of where they sit and how they sit within the ecosystem, etc. But again, this goes back to time. If you're going into the GCC wanting to fundraise quickly, you're probably going to get it wrong. If you're going in there with time to spend and building the relationships, it can be really successful. There's a lot of events actually where a lot of these family offices, the local family offices attend, for you to kind of start to get to know them and build that trust and build that relationship. So it's not that hard. The UAE is built around networking, to be honest. So it's very easy to get around, very easy to meet people. I think the only thing I would say is if you're meeting people without an agenda, you'll find it as a lot easier to do so with an agenda to start off with.
You said before earlier, I just want to bring that to the forefront now in connection to anyone who actually pulled out their pin for this small section of the podcast. You also said that there are definitely specific regions that you would want to go to if you have different vertical focuses. Could you just say a bit more about that or restate that part?
Maybe we should have said actually to people earlier on that the UAE is made up of 7 states. 7 states. But actually the states that you would hear about are Dubai and Abu Dhabi, right? Those are the global states. And if you're raising money for anything around sustainability, healthcare, kind of cyber, I would go to Abu Dhabi. That's where all the government entities are working in those kind of spaces. That's where the kind of big hospitals are to a certain degree, and the oil and gas and so on. If you're kind of looking at FinTech, you're looking at AI, you're looking at EdTech, any of that kind of stuff, it's Dubai. That's where a lot of, the FinTech hub is in Dubai, to the IFC, education, etc. So it's all there.
Omar, maybe to kind of get us in the mood of wrapping up, I think it would be cool if you could share, if you have any, success stories. So do you have any insights or real stories that you can share of European VCs, European GPs having success in both building relationships in the region, GCC region, but even raising capital from LPs in the region?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been quite a few. Obviously, the big funds, you kind of know about. But I mean, Speed Invest, I think Daniel's spoken openly about it. He's probably, Daniel since 3 years ago, would spend maybe 3 or 4 visits a year, or 4 or 5 visits a year to the GCC, whether it be to UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain. And, raised a decent amount of money into their latest fund, which I think was 500 million from the region, has made some great relationships there. But again, it's been on the back of spending time in the region. I think Cherry Ventures has raised a decent amount from the region. So there's a few funds like that, European funds that have done really well. What's interesting as well about somebody like Daniel, it's that they've also invested in the region, not necessarily in the UAE, but they've got an investment in Egypt. And they've used the UAE as a gateway to some of the investments in Africa, which again, it kind of ticked the boxes for some of the families they've raised from, but also the sovereigns as well. So it's just trying to find that fit. But yeah, there's the 2 that have done quite well, I think, from the region so far.
Yeah, and we have an episode already recorded. I don't know if it'll be published before or after this episode, but when that comes out, definitely listen to it. It's with Daniel Kuiper-Knorr from Speed Invest. I also think he said something which was very interesting, and that was, well, we've just closed the fund, so I'm going to Dubai now because I'm going to the region just to be there, not fundraising, because that's really the best time to go there and build relationships. And also just because, as you said, he's built a relationship with the region already. So he's also just enjoying his time there. But I think that there's an important point there.
Is that really smug of him to say, I'm going now just to relax? Or
I will not comment on that. No, I do think that. I do think that it's true enough. And my wife has been saying, "Fuck, I want to go with you as well," because she's been there. I guess 4 years ago or so, and she's really been wanting to come back to Dubai and see what's happened.
But I think we've said this before, haven't we? I think sometimes as VCs we forget that it's sales, and sales is about relationships, and that's what it is. And you're always selling, you're always building that relationship, and that's, I think, according to Daniel, he does that really well. He does that really well.
On that note, I think we should call this a wrap and invite everyone to join us on the trip. Just reach out and we'll see what we can do to get your spot in our delegation. Omar, thanks so much for taking us on this journey with you. We think that you and everything that we're doing together is incredibly exciting. Everyone listening in, if you enjoyed this episode of the European VC podcast, do drop us a review on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening to this. And do also go to eu.vc and subscribe if you haven't yet done so.
I am David, the LP Syndicate Lead, joined by my co-host Andreas, the LP Hype Man. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and we can't wait to see you all out there, hopefully in the GCC region.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
United and determined, we can serve as a model for other regions of the world.
The nature of a problem requires a European response.
Europe is a story of new beginnings. New beginnings.
Let's start acting.
How you like them apples?